Hi everyone, in this video we're going to discuss main ideas of the Budapest Gambit. At the end of the video there will be an exercise for you, so make sure to watch it till the end. And if it is the first time you are on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell not to miss the new content. Budapest Gambit starts after the moves d4, knight f6, c4 and black's sharp e7, e5 response, sacrificing the pawn. So after d takes e5, black has two options. The knight may jump to e4 and g4. g4 is considered the main line, so let's start with the sideline, knight to e4. What can be the idea behind placing the knight at so a vulnerable position? Because it feels like it can be attacked in various ways and there is no real support, like in many cases in other openings where the knight occupies this position and it is possible to support it with pawns. So here it's not the case because pawn is on a5 and there is un passant possible. So the thing here is that there is a threat of bishop to b4 check, and in many cases, if white ignores it, black may benefit from it. So just bishop b4, forcing something to d2 or c3, there is an exchange of the knight, and black is fine. So the most logical continuation for white here is just to prevent it with the help of a3 first. Yes, it's another pawn move, but black didn't yet achieve anything significant in the sense of development, so it's completely fine for white to try it. Now black has two options. The one looks very natural, just to play bishop c5, developing the bishop and attacking f2, where after white may continue with the e3. Slightly passive, but quite solid, and after something like queen e7 and bishop to d3, the knight indeed becomes a problem for black. After queen takes e5, black regains the missing pawn and protects the knight, but now the queen becomes quite vulnerable, and after knight to f3, queen to e6, and then b4, grabbing space and using the vulnerable position of the bishop, white is gradually getting the advantage. For example, after bishop to e7 and knight to d4 move, attacking the queen again, and something like queen to g6, there may be a serious problem with the knight, which is now pinned. So white may continue with the queen to c2, attacking it, and after black's d5 move, trying to connect the light square bishop to the game as well. Easiest for white is just to take on d5, and after something like f5 move, to castle. So in this case, white is avoiding all the complications and is having pretty solid position in the center in addition to extra material. So black literally achieved nothing in this case. Let's have a look at the other option. So right after a3, black may undermine the pawn on e5. So in this position, right after a3, black may continue with the d6 move. In which case, of course, if white captures on d6, it only helps with the development. But white may try something like queen to c2, attacking the knight. And after knight to c5, continue the attack with the b4. And after knight to e6 and e takes d6, bishop takes d6 and bishop to b2, we may notice that white won a pawn. Black has just a slight advantage in development here, which is insignificant. And white also managed to grab some space on the queen side. So after something like castling, knight to f3, a5, c5, bishop e7 and e3, it doesn't seem like white has any problem with continuing the development. Position is not that open for black to attack the king, which is a bit stuck in the center. So it feels like white is just having healthy extra pawn. This concludes the portion on knight to e4. So now let's get to the main line, which is knight to g4. So after d takes e5, knight goes to g4, attacking the pawn. The idea is simple. White wants to grab on e5 next move. Let's have a look what happens if white is indeed greedy and tries to combine the protection of the e5 pawn with the attack against the knight and place queen to d4. Because if now black spends the time on defending the knight, intending to play knight c6 next move, white will indeed have time to protect the pawn and everything is going to be all right. So the main reaction here for black is to play d6. So now it becomes a true gambit because black is indeed sacrificing the pawn. And after e takes d6, bishop takes on d6. And here we can see the idea behind the gambit. So indeed black gets very interesting pieces play, and white's pieces are quite awkward here, especially queen, which is developed at the early stage of the game. Now becomes a serious problem, becomes a target simply. There is a threat of bishop b4 check now, for example. If queen takes on g7, let's say, there is bishop e5 attacking the queen and forcing it to g5, where after it is possible just to grab it. And after bishop takes on g5 to take on b2, winning the game. Queen takes g7 is not forced, of course. Let's have a look at the other options. For example, in one of the games, white played bishop to d2, attempt to prevent bishop to b4 and combine it with the development, and maybe later to relocate the bishop to c3 to occupy a good diagonal. Black responded with castling, protecting g7 and making the king safe, intended to continue the attack with the knight c6 and so on. Let's have a look how it is simple for black to play in such a situation. White played h3 here because this knight is getting annoying, attacking f2. Black responded with the knight to c6, attacking the queen. Queen went to e4, now rook to e8. So as you can see, black seamlessly finding further attacking moves here. Queen goes to c2. And now it's clear that, well, black has an amazing advantage in development, and this is usually a sign that there may be something concrete and usually connected with the attack against the king. And indeed, here is knight captures on f2. And it appears that taking this knight is very bad, because after king f2 and queen to h4, there is no satisfactory defense against the checkmating attack. For example, after king to f3, it's possible to play knight to d4 with the checkmate. So after knight takes f2, the knight is just invulnerable there, and this means that black at least wins rook, but the things are even worse for white. For example, in the game we're looking at, white decided to play knight to c3, where after black continued with the knight to d4, attacking the queen. Queen went to a4, and after knight to d3 check, using the fact that e2 is pinned, white's king was forced to d1, where after knight captured on b2 with the fork. So this is a very generic introduction to main ideas behind Budapest Gambit. Black will be really happy to get something like this. So the logical attempt for white here is to try to avoid all these dynamics. And white has a chance to do that. Let's have a look at the main line. So after knight to g4, white may continue with just a normal development, combining it with the protection of the pawn e5, but the idea is not to keep that pawn because it is impossible, but just to bring the pieces to natural squares. The most popular continuation, I believe, is something like bishop to f4 here, which has its merits, of course, but it allows some crazy lines after g5. So if you really want to make this position calm, you should probably consider playing simple knight to f3 move, where after black may play bishop to c5, attacking the f2, literally forcing white to play something like e3, which makes the bishop passive. But this bishop will occupy another diagonal later. It is a1, h8, so it's not a big deal. Now knight to c6, black is developing the piece and attacking e5. White is also continuing with the development, knight to c3. Black may castle here. White plays bishop to e2. As you can see, very modest approach. So what's the point behind it? Let's have a look at what happens once black regains the material. For example, rook goes to e8, knight goes to d2, attacking the knight on g4. Now knight captures on e5. So black achieved what they wanted. So the pawn is regained and feels like position should be balanced, but white has a slight advantage here long term because of the pawn structure. So it appears that white has better control over center. Let's have a look at one example. For example, in one of the games where I decided to play knight to e4, bringing one knight to the center, mainly intending to go to g3 in case there will be a necessity of protecting the king. For now, attacking the bishop and forcing it to a passive position. And after bishop f8, white continued with the b3. As I said before, there is no problem with developing that bishop, so now it occupies a1, h8 diagonal. Black continues with the d6. White plays bishop to b2, then queen to h4, active move. But black doesn't have a real chance to come up with the attack on the king side. So knight to g3, bishop to e6, queen to d2, f5. Again, black has to do something active here, at least black has to try it. And now knight goes to d5. So that is basically the main point here. White has this outpost, something that black doesn't. After knight to d5, rook to c8, protecting c7, white may continue with something like f4, knight to g4, bishop takes g4. Now black has pair of bishops, but position is rather closed, so it is probably not that critical. And after castling, white has a better situation in the center, some slight pressure. So it is probably a slight advantage that is not so simple to convert, but practically it's quite annoying for black to play something like that, in my opinion, because it is really hard to find active plan. So what black has to do here is just to wait and probably fight white's ideas. Okay, so that is basically it about the Budapest Gambit. Now let's get to the exercise part. Budapest Gambit is one of the gambits that should be accepted for better good. Let's have a look what happens if white decides to avoid it altogether by playing d5. So it appears that is the best possible situation for black, because in this case dark squares are being weakened and black easily develops the bishop to c5. Now we can notice that black has no problems. Neither with the development nor with the central control. Yeah, white has some slight advantage in space probably, but black compensates it easily with play on dark squares. So one of the examples here, knight goes to c3, black continues with the d6, white plays e4. More and more pawns are being placed in light squares, which weakens dark squares more and more. Castles, bishop goes to d3, knight jumps to g4, f2 is under attack, knight goes to h3, queen goes to h4. Pay attention, nothing is sacrificed, so it's just an attack for free. Castling, now h6 preventing bishop to g5. White tried rook to b1 in this game. Black continued with the knight to a6, preventing b4 and developing a piece. White played a3, intending to play b4 anyway. And here black started the attack on the king side, trying to open the f file and get to f2. White captured on f5. Black captured on f5. Bishop f5. Rook takes f5. Another rook is ready to get to f file. Knight e4. Bishop to d4. No problems. So the bishop is still here on this diagonal. And white decided to play b4, which is a serious mistake. So that is our starting position for the exercise. Feel free to stop the video and restart it whenever you feel like you have a solution. And we're going to discuss it right now. So the thing is, white is not developed, white is not coordinated here, and no surprises, black has a tactical solution, while black has very good concentration of the pieces on the king side. So the only misplaced piece in black's camp is this knight on a6, but it doesn't matter in this particular case. So knight on e4 is vulnerable, and black starts with the knight to h2, just intended to win a pawn. If king takes h2, queen takes e4, black is a pawn up. But what happens if white decides to take on d6? In this case, well, it's okay to take the knight, and then after king h2 to take the pawn on f2, for example, like this. As you can see, knight on h3 is pinned, so this is also acceptable. But there is a much better way to play. So after knight to h2 and knight to d6, black has very nice knight to f3 move. The point being that after g takes f3, there is a queen g3 check, using the fact that f2 is pinned. And after king h1, queen takes h3, everything is being decided with a simple linear checkmate. That's the solution. Thanks a lot for watching. As I usually mention in Gambit videos, it's not a theoretical manual, so we have discussed just a few lines, in my opinion, pretty descriptive, but still just a few. Not all of them, so just make your own investigation, learn it yourself, and make your own conclusions. But I think this is a good starting step for your own studying of this opening. Hope it helped. If you liked it, press the like button and see you next videos.